Hello there, ladies and gents. Welcome to today's video. My name is Marcos Aguirre, and in today's video, we're going to discuss a topic that's been done to death on YouTube. But here's one more video on the subject. Which is better, ESP or LTD? The short answer, ESP. But is the ESP $2,000 better than the LTD? Let's talk about that in this video. For the purpose of this video, we'll be excluding guitars that are on opposite ends of the spectrum. So we'll be excluding ESP custom shop guitars and LTD 200 series guitars. What we'll focus on this video is two versions of the same guitar in which LTD tries to give you exactly what ESP does and how much they succeed. The guitars I'll be A-Bing in this video are an ESP standard Alexi Laiho signature series guitar and an ESP LTD Alexi 600 signature series guitar. We'll start off talking about what was the same about these guitars out of the factory, what was different, and if the differences could be bridged with upgrades to the LTD. So out of the factory, both of these guitars came with 24 extra jumbo frets, an ebony fretboard, a 42mm width neck, an alder body, a 3-piece maple neck, solid pinstripes, and a satin finish on the back of the neck. And I almost forgot to mention, both of these guitars have a 25.5-inch scale length. Now let's talk about the differences between both of these guitars. So the ESP has pearloid inlays, whereas the LTD has acrylic inlays. And I believe this is a standard in LTD guitars to have acrylic inlays, even if they're made to look like pearl. The next difference, and perhaps the biggest, is that the ESP comes out of the factory with a gain boost that's controlled with an external switch, which is what I switched on and off right there. And this gain boost has up to 10 decibels of extra gain, which you can adjust with a small screwdriver, and a 3-band EQ, which you can also adjust with a small screwdriver. The paint jobs on these guitars is also slightly different. On the ESP, you can definitely tell it was a human hand that made those pinstripes because they're a little more elongated with, I believe, like with the use of a brush stroke versus with the LTD, you can tell the pinstripes were made by a machine because they're very precise and very geometrical. It's most noticeable where the pinstripes meet. It's only a very slight difference though, and it's honestly not a big takeaway or anything. The bevels on these guitars are also slightly different. So the LTD has bigger bevels, which look a lot more geometrical. In my opinion, they look a little cooler because it helps distinguish these guitars from the other Rhodes types of guitars, but this has been abandoned with new iterations of these Alexi guitars. Also, the bevels are present on the back of the ESP, but not on the back of the LTD. This has been fixed with the new iterations of the LTD Alexis, though, where the LTDs do have the bevels on the back to make them more like the ESP counterparts. And on the back, we can see that the routing cavities on the ESP are a lot better than the routing cavities on the LTD. The next big difference is that the LTD was made in Korea and the ESP was made in Japan. The quality is better on the ESP, but not by a ton, and it's brought down slightly by the fact that the ESP has some imperfections that are to be expected with a guitar that's handmade. For example, the scarf joint there. You can definitely feel where the masking tape was when they painted the body of this guitar and left the neck unfinished. The LTD is a different story, where the neck meets the body at the neck joint. It feels completely flush, and I'm still trying to figure out how LTD does this, but it does feel slightly better on the LTD. Overall, the ESP is a better guitar in terms of quality, but not by a lot. Just based on how it plays and feels, it is slightly better. And tuning stability on both of these guitars is fantastic. Here's a side-by-side comparison, and they look almost identical with the exception of the collar and the bevels on the back. But this perfectly depicts what LTD did, and it's basically giving us a guitar that's 90% as good as the ESP counterpart. Overall, the biggest differences between these two guitars come in the hardware and the electronics, which lead me into the next topic. Can the differences be bridged between these two guitars if changing the electronics and the hardware? The answer to that question, yes, but only to some extent. For example, you can buy an EMG Alexi and install it on your LTD, and it'll have a gain boost that's very similar to that of the ESP. You can also buy the hardware to match that of the ESP, and you'll have an LTD that's up to 95% as similar as the ESP. However, there are some things you just can't change about your LTD. For example, the country of manufacture is never going to change. as well as the headstock logo. So going back to my original question, is ESP thousands of dollars better than LTD? In my opinion, no. Where I think the money goes in spending that much more on an ESP is in paying the people that make these amazing guitars well. And honestly, if you have the money, get an ESP. But if you don't, just use what you have and know that you're not missing out on a world of difference. As guitarists, we like to allude to the idea that the expensive guitar is going to sound that much better that we can't live without it. But I'll end the video by saying this. You don't need an expensive guitar to be a good guitar player. If a cheap or mid-range priced guitar gives you everything you need, then you have all you need. The best analogy I can give you guys with this is buying an expensive car is not going to make you a better driver. And speaking of cars, if you want to think of these two brands, the ESP and LTD guitars as car brands, you can think of LTDs as Toyotas and ESPs as Lexus. So again, buying a more expensive guitar isn't going to make you a better guitar player, just like buying a more expensive car isn't going to make you a better driver. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you have questions, comments, concerns regarding these two guitars, put them in the comment section of this video. Besides that, you guys stay safe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.